For 2 millennia, the mainstream Christian tradition has handed down a very specific portrait of Jesus. He appears much like a wise Greek philosopher, a miracles-performing savior descending from heaven. In this established narrative, one of his closest disciples, Thomas, plays the role of a cynical, doubting fool who required physical proof to believe. But that narrative was challenged when archaeologists unearthed a cache of ancient papyri in the Egyptian desert. Among them was the Gospel of Thomas. For centuries, Orthodox institutions had forbidden this text, dismissing it as a later heretical forgery. However, modern paleographers have dated these physical fragments as far back as 150 CE. That makes them as old as the earliest manuscript fragments we have of the New Testament. The core contents likely originate even earlier, in the first half of the 1st century. This archaeological reality suggests the Doubting Thomas narrative is actually a deliberate 2,000-year-old smear campaign engineered to bury the original words of Jesus. Determining the true age of a manuscript requires the scientific study of ancient writing. Paleographic principles show that scribes almost never make a text more difficult to read. Instead, they update language and add helpful context. Because of this, the terser, more difficult reading is identified as the older one. This side-by-side comparison shows the parable of the lost sheep recorded in both the canonical Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Thomas. The version we find in Matthew is 35% longer. Mainstream scribes added an emotional ending where the shepherd explicitly states he loves the lost sheep more than the other 99. The Gospel of Thomas strips away all of that narrative padding. It contains no stories and no comforting explanations. Instead, it delivers a list of private, paradoxical riddles designed to confuse the intellect and force the student into contemplation. Paleographic evidence establishes the Gospel of Thomas as raw source material, recorded before mainstream scribes softened the difficult teachings for a mass audience. Thomasine theology demands intense, difficult inward self-knowledge to reach the divine light. The community that preserved these texts viewed Jesus as a sophisticated Jewish mystic who taught that the primordial light of the Creator resides inside every person. This inward mysticism clashed with the goals of the Johannine community, the authors of the Gospel of John. This community operated in a different cultural environment, attempting to spread the Christian movement to a much broader Gentile and Greco-Roman audience. This audience required a divine savior they could worship externally. They favored the comfort of a miracles-performing demigod over the demanding, mystical state of being required by Thomas. The Johannine authors needed to elevate Jesus to literal deity status to reach that world. This resulted in a rewriting of Christian theology to ensure their version of the message survived. Historians and literary scholars recognize the Gospel of John as a polemic, an ancient form of textual warfare explicitly written to attack a rival ideology. The Gospel of John wages this war right from its opening lines. While Thomas argues that we all come from the same light as Jesus, John chapter 1 explicitly states that the light existed exclusively within Jesus, not within the individual. John then targets the character of Thomas. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus takes the disciple aside, praising him as his wisest student. In his own narrative, John portrays Thomas as a clueless cynic who repeatedly misunderstands basic instructions. This character assassination culminates in the post-resurrection scene. John writes a scenario where Thomas refuses to believe without touching the physical wounds. After the famous instruction to not doubt but believe, Thomas is forced to his knees to declare Jesus, "My Lord and my God." The Doubting Thomas story functions as a piece of theological propaganda, engineered to destroy the credibility of a rival community. The Johannine polemic shaped Western history. The Romanized concept of a demigod replaced the mystical Jewish teacher, leaving the wisest disciple defined as a fool for 2,000 years. The early institutional church traded the intense psychological work of internal transformation for the portable appeal of external belief. But the survival of the Gospel of Thomas papyri offers an opportunity to bypass centuries of institutional editing and engage with a demanding, unvarnished spiritual tool. Will you accept the polished, comfortable portrait handed down by the victors of history? Or are you ready to confront the raw, paradoxical reality of the mystical Jesus?